This is WJTS Informed. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bill Potter, your host. And joining us in the studio is State Senator Mark Messmer, who comes in on Fridays and talks about things that happen in the legislature. Well, today we're going to talk about, we'll call it Legislation 101, to kind of give people an idea of how a bill actually gets going. And I guess what's the first thing that happens? How does a bill even get thought of?
Okay, and it usually comes from, there's two primary directions a thought for a bill can come from. I mean, sometimes it's a state agency and maybe there's a change in federal law. You know, it could be banking, it could be insurance, it could be utilities. I mean, there could be a myriad of, all of our state regulatory agencies all have laws they operate out of. And sometimes updates for laws come from the state agencies. They say, they call one of us and they say, we're putting together an update in our state laws to make sure we're compliant with federal laws. I mean, it could be, any industry around banking. Like I said, that all of the industries have, and there's I think there's 36 sections of code, and each one of those deals with a different area of either state government or private industry. So sometimes they're generated that direction. Many times, and I'd say most of us in the House and Senate have had somebody from our district called and said, I've been trying to deal with this specific area of code, and this part of it just doesn't work. And it's just not, up to date. Technology has changed. Processes might be outdated, and hey, could you fix this problem for me? And I had one last year from the BMV that a gentleman from Hayesville called me, and that happens for me. I'd say half or more of my bills every year come from somebody at home that said, this doesn't really work real well, can't we update it? But last year the guy called, he said, I sold a car. I gave the title to the new buyer. You sign it, you put the mileage on it, give them the title. He said the guy never refiled the title under his name. It's set, and it's parked illegally in Huntingburg, and I got a bunch of tickets. And I went to the BMV, and they said, sorry, we can't help you, because current law says the only person who can transfer the title is the buyer. So, and that is anything with the title, a boat, an RV, a motorcycle, a car, anything that has a car title. Prior to, and when I called the BMV and said, can we do something about this? And then they said, yeah, that's just something we struggle with every year. And I thought, good Lord, why didn't you do something about it? So, issues like that pop up. This year I had a auto repair shop in a body shop in Petersburg that said, we're really having trouble dealing with insurance companies and them denying coverage on manufacturer recommended repairs, and so they call with a problem, and here's where the rubber meets the road and why something's not working, and then you start the process of meeting with. We have a group in Indianapolis called Legislative Services. They work for all the House and Senate members, about 100 attorneys, and each one is assigned one of those 36 sections of code. Some cover more than one. Sometimes there's a House, one of those is assigned House members, another one assigned Senate members, some are assigned to both, House. It just varies based on issue, but you take the issue to them of what the problem is, and then they research our current laws, and they look for the right way to word, the correction that you're wanting. Sometimes you borrow language from other states. Sometimes they just do their best to create the legal framework of what that update needs to be, and all that process happens when we're out of session. So like this year when we're done in March, from middle of March till the end of this year, as those issues either come from industry groups, agency groups, individuals in your district, all that happens during the interim time of the year. And sometimes we have study committees that are assigned to look at an issue, and a study committee will maybe talk about an issue more detailed over a 2 or 3 month period, come back with suggestions for for bills to be filed in the coming year. So all of that happens, and up till about usually around the 10th of December is when we have to stop filing requests for bills for next session. It's around the 8th, 9th, 10th that that second Friday of December is usually our cutoff. So you work on bills, you get your request into Legislative Services, they craft it into a piece of legislation, and then when the first, anytime after Organizational Day, which is usually about the middle of November, anytime from Organizational Day till about the first week into session, you can file those bills, and whether you go to the House clerk or the Secretary of the Senate, you file the bill, they give it a bill number, and then those bills either go to the Speaker of the House or the President Pro Tem in the Senate, and they read them, they look at the digest, and they decide, okay, what committee do I think that needs to go to? That person, and they may have their chief of staff or one of their attorneys help look through them, and they look them over, and they assign them to one of the 25 committees. So, and the committees are, everything from local government to public policy to civil law, judicial law, Commerce Committee, Utilities Committee. All of the different committees each have generally areas that we're assigned, to review, legislation that's filed in that content area. So they assign them to committee, and then we'll have Senate bills that get filed that will run through the first half of session in the Senate, and they get assigned to committee, and then the committee chairman, the President Pro Tem would just say, these are the committees I'm sending them to. The chairman have to then read them and look at the content, look at the bill, and say, and if I get one that I'm have concerns about, I'll call the author and I'll say, if I see things that maybe look like trouble spots, I'll suggest amendments to them, and then they can. I typically like to have as good as you possibly can when a bill gets to the committee hearing day. Like I said, once you sort through all of the bills you've got assigned, and you'll have in short session we just have 3 to 4 hearings. In a long session we'll have 7 to 8 hearing dates. You'll look through that. Then the bills that come to my committee, I'll decide which week which bills we're going to hear, and if there's bills that I like but I think need to be tweaked, I like to have them when they leave committee to be as close to the final product as you possibly can.
Otherwise, you got to rework them.
You got to rework them on the floor. You got to send them to the House. They get reworked some more. Sometimes the issues are just complicated enough, and as you talk through it, and continue to talk through it, on the original Senate committee, or if it passes in the House committee. Sometimes it just takes time to work through all the details, but I don't like to send one out that says, well, we know it's not close, but we'll continue to work on it. I like to have them pretty close to their final version when they leave committee.
When you have these committee meetings, which means the bill never even has made it to the floor. Correct. Do people come in and say, well, this is what I mean?
That's where the public testimony comes in. Because in that committee hearing, that's advertised, minimum 3 days before you're going to schedule it. And typically, if I'm going to schedule something, and I know I have experts that I've been talking to and crafting it,
or somebody that's wants the bill.
Wants the bill. Okay. Yeah. I let them know in advance, but it goes up on the state website. On the calendar, when you schedule them for hearing, then that goes out to the public, and there's the lobbyists out in the hall that represent the different industry groups. They're watching for those schedules, and when stuff pops up, if it's something they've read through and they've seen it's been assigned to your committee, then and they'll usually weigh in before it's actually scheduled for a hearing date. If they have concerns about it, or if they like it, they'll let you know either way. But in that committee hearing, it's when private individuals can come in and testify, business owners can come in and testify, the agencies that are involved with that, implementing that legislation come in and testify, lobbyists, come in and testify, and you'll get people come in, for or against the bill. And I've had bills come to my committee hearing and thought we had, sorted out all the positives and negatives, but sometimes things pop up in a committee hearing. And if I think a bill is going to be difficult, I won't schedule it for the last day because, sometimes if things pop up and you say, we're going to hold this bill and we'll amend it and bring it back next week, you can do that. But typically, I like to have them ready. I like to have them, the amended version ready to go. Vote in the amendments that day in committee, hear the bill, and then vote them out. I like to do them in that process. Some committee chairmen just hear the bills, never vote on them on that first day, hold them until the following week, and then the following week, amend them if they're needed and vote them out.
So in your committee then you have how many people?
We have 11 people in Commerce Committee. Some committees have 10,
Okay.
some have 11, like Appropriations, or Tax and Fiscal I think has maybe 15.
Okay.
But most of them have, around 10 or 11 committee members.
And then you vote in a
You
simple
vote them out.
majority?
Simple
whether
majority.
it goes out of that committee or not?
Correct. Now, if there's 10 people on a committee, or you have to have 6 votes for a bill for it to get out. I mean, if only 8 people show up, the bill can't pass with 5 of 8. It has to pass with. So you have to have
6 of 8.
You have to have a quorum, which is if there's 10 or 11 people, you have to have 6 people that are minimum to even discuss a bill.
Okay.
And then you have to have 6 affirmative votes for that bill to get out of committee. If there's 15, you have to have 7 or 8, whatever. So, yeah, I mean, you've got to have one more than a majority to get a bill out of committee.
And then it passes out of committee, goes to the floor of either the House or the
Yep.
Senate, depends on where it
Yep.
is.
Once it's out of committee, then it goes. The committee hearing is called its first reading. So the second reading of a bill is when you send it to the whole body, and all 50 members can then look at it. And usually, if there's something that if they've been monitoring a bill and it hits the floor, I mean, that's when all 50 members of the Senate or 100 members of the House, they get a chance to amend it on the floor. That's called the second reading amendment, hearing.
So that's when you discuss things.
Yeah,
You can
and-
get up and say, I think this is a bad bill or a
but
good bill.
only if there's an amendment. I mean, if you say, hey, Mark's got this bill on second reading. I think we need to amend, this or that, into or out of the bill. If there's no amendments on a bill, it goes through that second reading, process, and if we could say we call the bill down, for action. If there's no amendments, then the bill proceeds the next day to the what they call the third reading calendar. It could be amended. If you don't call a bill when it's up for second reading, if you never call the bill for action, it dies. So eventually, we'll hit a point in our calendar where that second reading, activity will come to an end. And if you hold a bill on second reading and you never call it to the floor for action, then it's not moved to the third reading. So sometime if bills end up controversial coming out of committee, maybe a chairman, moved a bill out that was pretty, questionable, we'll have discussions in caucus, and it's not unusual for a couple times a year for us to ask one of our members, just don't call the bill for a vote.
So
Just
it
don't
never,
call it
never
down.
goes anywhere.
So just
Okay.
it stops there. Then on third reading, it has to have, in the Senate, it has to have 26 votes for a bill. I mean, even if there's less than 50 people there, they have to have a majority of the body, to pass. So we've had bills stall out 25-25. Every year that happens at least once. And if they don't get 26 votes, you can bring it back the next day. I think you have 3 days to bring it back and try to get somebody to change their vote and vote it. Or if the lieutenant governor is there, they can break a 25-25 tie.
Okay.
Now there are several
That's
days.
in the Senate,
That's
though.
in the Senate, and the Speaker of the House is one of the voting members in the House, and they have to have 51 votes, on third reading. And the Speaker of the House, is one of those voting members. And if it's a 50-50, there's no tiebreaker in the House. But here again, you'd have time to bring it back, try to persuade
Get that
somebody,
extra person.
get somebody to change their vote. You can bring it back, as long as you do it before the session time dies. And then after the first half of session, all those bills that pass either the House or Senate change. And now starting Monday this week, we're working on House bills that pass the first half, and it goes through the same process. Assigned to a committee.
Okay.
Committee chairman look at it. I like it. I don't like it. And not every bill that gets past the first half gets a hearing the second half. That it happens.
Sure.
I mean, things pop up. Chairman on the other side doesn't really like it. Maybe there was people in the hall. The lobbyists saw the bill. Weren't paying attention to it the first half. Second half, they raise a fuss, and so a lot of bills don't even get a hearing the second half, and then if they pass out of committee, they go to the floor for second reading. And if a bill is changed in the Senate that was a House bill or in the House that was a Senate bill, after they pass, if they've been changed, then they got to go back to the House of Origin for a final vote, because the same language has to pass both chambers. Now, if I had one of my bills changed in the House and I don't like the changes, I can either file what they call a consent motion, where I consent to those changes, we do one final vote, done, or I can file a dissent motion. And then, if I dissent, then the President Pro Tem assigns a Democrat and a Republican, the House Speaker assigns a Democrat and Republican, and you set up what they call a conference committee. And then that conference committee you have to have at least one hearing, on a conference committee, and you bring that bill, and if I, as the author, control that, that hearing, I say, here's what was changed in the House. I don't like this or that. This is what I want to change. You bring your proposed amendment. Then all 4 conferees have to sign off on that, on that change. But usually you propose the amendment, you take it back, and each group talks to their caucus. Their caucuses say yes or no. You sign the report, and then it goes back to both House and Senate for a final vote. So there's a lot of places a bill can die.
And then when they all pass, then they go to the governor.
Then they go to the governor.
And some bills become law immediately. Some bills become law the 1st of July?
Yes. Typically, most bills take effect July 1st, typically. Now, if you have a bill that you want to speed up the enactment date, you can put what they call it, they call it emergency passage. I mean, it's not necessarily an emergency, that's just the term they use. But then it goes into effect, the day the governor signs it. Okay. So they either go into effect the day he signs it, or typically, July 1st of the same year. Sometime they're maybe another 6 months or a year out farther than that they take effect, but most of the bills take effect July 1. A few upon passage, and a few, and occasionally in years out in the future.
If someone wants to find out more, probably the best place to go is to the State House or the Senate
under
website.
in.gov/legislative, I think is, and then on that you can either look at House bills, you can look at Senate bills. It's pretty user friendly. When you get that, there's a tab that's the bill tab, and then you can say bills by numerical order or bills by author, so you can look to see who's filed what. And when you pull that website up, the bills that are highlighted in blue are the ones that are still active. The ones that are just black and white are the ones that died either because they didn't get a hearing, or they didn't pass out of committee, or they died on the floor. I mean, they can meet peril from a lot of reasons. But usually about 15 to 20% of the bills that get filed are what end up getting passed by the time we're done. I think roughly 30% of the bills that were filed, passed during the first half of session, that'll get whittled down. And sometimes there's an exact bill in the House and Senate. 2 people had the same idea, so they move both bills, and eventually, usually one of those is merged into the other one. But sometime you pass 2 identical bills in both bodies, and then then they both become law. Which, I mean, that's people wanting pride of ownership, I guess, of the bill.
Well, thank you. So, we're out of time, but thank you very much for kind of summarizing that. And I'm sure that, you're around a lot. We'll see you at different parades.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's a time that somebody can find out more, or go to you and say, hey, this is what I think. Or you can go to your state rep, or if you're in another area, go to your state senator or your state rep and tell them what you think and laws you think need to
most
be
of the bills that we do each year are just updates to existing laws, and those ideas come from our constituents. So that's a great way to see, the public's impact on day-to-day issues, really come to good benefit.
All right. Well, Mark, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Our guest has been State Senator Mark Messmer. He is District 48 State Senator for you. Thank you for watching WJTS Inform. We're local people watching local people.